The space station called Valara hung in the darkness like a broken toy. Its protective shields flickered and sparked each time the enemy ships fired their weapons. Inside the main control room, Ambassador Krelix gripped the edge of his desk with all four of his arms. His hands shook as another blast hit the station. The whole building trembled under his feet. Around him stood representatives from 17 different alien species. They huddled together in small groups, their faces showing the same expression. Fear. Pure fear. No one spoke much anymore. What was there to say? They all knew they were probably going to die today. The creatures attacking them were called the Kryn Swarm. They had arrived 3 days ago without any warning. Their ships looked like huge insects made of metal and flesh. They were alive somehow, breathing and pulsing in the void of space. 27 of these monster ships now surrounded the station, firing constantly at the weakening shields. Krelix had never been a military leader. He was a diplomat. He talked to people and solved problems with words. The station was built for peace, for meetings and trade discussions. It had some small weapons, but nothing strong enough to fight off a real attack. They were scientists and ambassadors, not soldiers. And now they were trapped with no way out. He had sent emergency messages to every nearby system. The response had been the same from everyone. His own people, the Turian Confederation, said their military fleet was 3 weeks away. The powerful Xerillian Empire said they wanted to stay neutral and would not get involved. The peaceful Vesk had no military at all. One by one, every government had told him the same thing. They were on their own. No help was coming. Krelix looked at the main screen showing the station's shield strength. 30% remaining. Maybe 6 hours left before the shields would collapse completely. After that, the Kryn would board the station. He had seen reports of what happened when the Kryn boarded a ship. It was not a quick death. Ambassador, called out Thale, a young communications officer with pale blue skin. She was a Vesk, barely old enough to be working at the station. We are receiving a response. It is from a species I have never heard of before. They are not in our database. Krelix felt a small flicker of something. Not hope exactly, but curiosity at least. Put it through, he ordered. A strange voice came through the speakers. It was rough and deep, speaking in a language that the computer struggled to translate at first. Then the words became clear. Valara Station, this is Captain Jack Morrison of the Earth vessel Defiant. We are 3 hours away from your position. Hold on. Help is coming. Earth. Krelix searched his memory but found nothing. He pulled up the computer files and found only a brief entry. A newly discovered world, classified as a Class 12 death world. The inhabitants had only made first contact with the galactic community recently. They were primitive by galactic standards. His heart sank in his chest. What could one small ship from a backward world do against 27 Kryn vessels? But they had no other choice. No one else was coming. Krelix opened the communication channel. Captain Morrison, we thank you for any help you can provide, but you must understand the danger here. The Kryn swarm has 27 ships surrounding this station. Our shields will fail in approximately 6 hours. This is a very dangerous situation. There was a pause. Then Krelix heard a sound that the translator said was laughter. Human laughter. 27 ships? Well, that is a start. Defiant out. The channel went silent. Krelix stared at the communications panel in confusion. Had this human understood what he said? Did humans count numbers differently than other species? Why would someone laugh at such terrible odds? The other ambassadors began talking among themselves, their voices worried and uncertain. Some thought the human must be insane. Others wondered if humans had some secret weapon that made them confident. Most just felt more afraid than before. A single ship from an unknown species was not real help. 3 hours passed slowly. Each minute felt like an hour. The shields continued to drop. 25%, then 20%. The Kryn began moving their boarding ships into position. They knew the end was near. Krelix prepared his staff for the worst. He had everyone gather in the central chamber where they might make a final stand together. Then Thalie shouted from her station, "Contact, single vessel emerging from hyperspace. It is coming in fast. Energy readings are unusual. The ship class is small, approximately frigate size." On the main viewing screen, the human ship appeared. It was not beautiful like most galactic vessels. There was no elegant design or smooth curves. Instead, it looked brutal and dangerous. The whole ship was covered in thick armor plating that seemed excessive for such a small vessel, and it was moving fast, incredibly fast. It accelerated directly toward the Kryn fleet at a speed that made Krellix feel dizzy just watching. "Are they trying to commit suicide?" Someone whispered behind him. The Defiant opened fire. But these were not the usual energy weapons that civilized species used. These were not plasma beams or laser cannons. The humans were using kinetic weapons. They were firing pieces of metal at enormous speeds. Railguns. The computer identified them. Ancient, primitive technology that most species had abandoned thousands of years ago. But they worked. The first Kryn bioship barely had time to react before a massive tungsten rod punched completely through its body. The creature ship spasmed once and went completely dark, dead in space. Then the human ship did something that made every sensor operator in the station question their equipment. It did not slow down. Instead, it spun around using maneuvering thrusters that burned hotter than they should. The ship dove between two Kryn vessels, while firing weapons in 3 different directions at the same time. "That is impossible," Thalie said, her voice barely a whisper. "The G-forces from those maneuvers would kill any species we know. Their bodies would be crushed. Their internal organs would rupture. But the human ship kept dancing through the Kryn formation, like a predator hunting slower prey. When one Kryn vessel tried to grab it with organic tendrils, the Defiant used cutting lasers to slice them off. Then it launched a spread of missiles. The computer identified them as nuclear weapons. Nuclear. The primitive fission bombs that most species had stopped using ages ago because they were too crude and dangerous. The humans used them like they were nothing special, and against the Kryn's organic hulls they were devastatingly effective. Explosions bloomed in space like deadly flowers. 20 minutes. That was all it took. In just 20 minutes, half of the Kryn swarm was either destroyed or fleeing. The ships that remained tried to coordinate an attack, but the human vessel was always moving, always firing, always 3 steps ahead of them. Captain Morrison's voice came through the speakers again, and this time Krellix heard something new in it. Not fear, not desperation. The human sounded excited, like he was enjoying this. "Valara Station, you are clear to begin repairs. We will handle the cleanup." The last few Kryn vessels broke off their attack and fled into the darkness. The battle was over. The station was saved. But Krellix stood frozen, staring at the screen showing the human ship. It barely had any damage. A few scorch marks on the armor, nothing serious. They had just witnessed something that would change everything. They had seen a species from a death world fighting. A species that had evolved on a planet so dangerous that only the strongest and most aggressive could survive. And the terrifying part was that the humans had not even seemed to be trying very hard. One ship, one small frigate. It had done what would have required an entire fleet by normal military standards, and Captain Morrison had called 27 enemy vessels a start, as if it was a small number. Krellix slowly sat down in his chair. His hands were still shaking, but now it was not from fear. It was from the realization of what humanity represented. For 2,000 years, the galaxy had been at peace. Species talked and traded and solved problems through diplomacy. They had forgotten what real warriors looked like. Now they had been reminded. The humans had not forgotten. They could not forget because their entire planet had been trying to kill them since the day their species evolved. They had learned to be strong or die. There was no other option on a death world. Around the control room, the other ambassadors began to react. Some cheered, some cried with relief, some just stood in shock. Thalie was already sending messages to her government, telling them what had happened. The news would spread across the galaxy within hours. Krellix opened his personal log and began to write. "Today we met humanity. They are dangerous. They are aggressive. They use primitive weapons and take risks that would kill any other species. And they just saved all of our lives without hesitation. The galaxy needs to understand what this means. The humans are not like us. They come from a world that taught them how to fight, how to survive, how to win against impossible odds. We should hope they remain our friends. We should fear having them as enemies. And we should never, ever mistake their willingness to help for weakness. Today, the Deathworlders of Earth appeared, and nothing will be the same again. The conference room aboard Valara Station had been quickly repaired after the attack. Workers had patched the holes and fixed the broken equipment, but dark scorch marks still decorated one wall. Nobody had time to paint over them yet. Ambassador Krellick sat at the large table and studied the two humans sitting across from him. He tried not to stare, but it was difficult. These were the first humans he had seen in person. Captain Jack Morrison sat straight in his chair, looking relaxed but alert. He was tall for his species, with short dark hair that was turning gray on the sides. His eyes were a light brown color, and they seemed to notice everything in the room. Next to him sat Lieutenant Kate Sullivan, his second in command. She was shorter than Morrison, with bright red hair pulled back in a tight knot. Both of them wore dark blue uniforms with patches on the shoulders showing Earth's symbol. What struck Krellick most was how fragile they looked. Their skin seemed soft and thin. They had no natural armor, no scales or thick hide, no claws that he could see, no venomous spines or sharp teeth visible when they smiled. They looked delicate, almost weak. Yet these were the same beings who had destroyed half a Kryn swarm in 20 minutes. On behalf of the Turian Confederation and all the species here at this station, Captain Morrison, we owe you our lives, Krellick began, using his most formal tone. Your actions were remarkable. We are deeply grateful. Morrison smiled, and Krellick noticed the teeth. They were flat in the front but had sharp points on the sides. Predator teeth. But the smile itself seemed friendly. Just doing our job, Ambassador. Though I have to admit, your distress call was the first real action we have seen since Earth joined the Galactic community 6 months ago. 6 months. Krellick repeated the words slowly. Captain, please forgive my bluntness. Your ship showed combat abilities far beyond what we expected from a newly contacted species. The maneuvers alone should have killed everyone on your crew. The forces involved were extreme. Sullivan spoke up. Her voice carried a hint of amusement. Ambassador, Earth has a gravity of 9.8 meters per second squared. Our homeworld has weather systems that can destroy entire cities in hours. We have predators that can run faster than most species can drive their vehicles. Evolution does not make us stronger because it wants to. It makes us stronger because anything weaker died. Krellick felt his primary heart skip a beat. You are saying those maneuvers were survivable for your species? Uncomfortable, Morrison admitted. Very uncomfortable. But yes, survivable. Our ship has inertial dampeners that help reduce the forces. But even without them, human pilots have survived up to 9 times normal Earth gravity in atmospheric fighters. We black out eventually if it goes on too long, but we do not turn into liquid. The casual way Morrison said those words made Krellick feel cold. 9 times their normal gravity, and they merely passed out. Any other species would have been crushed to death. And the aggression? The tactics you used? You fought as if you had encountered the Kryn before. First time seeing them, Morrison said plainly, but not our first combat experience. Ambassador, I do not know what your people's history looks like, but humans have been fighting each other for thousands of years. We have fought over land, over resources, over ideas, and sometimes just because we were angry at each other. We have developed weapons that could destroy all life on our own planet. We nearly did exactly that twice. When Earth finally unified and reached for the stars, we did not stop being warriors. We just pointed our weapons outward instead of at each other. Thale, who had been sitting quietly and taking notes, looked up with confusion on her young face. But the galactic community has been at peace for over 2,000 cycles. How do you maintain combat readiness without any conflicts to fight? Sullivan's expression turned serious. Because we know what we are. We know what we are capable of doing. Every human child learns history in school. We learn about the wars, the genocides, the times when we almost destroyed ourselves completely. We remember what happened so we do not repeat those mistakes, but we also train constantly so we are ready if someone decides they want to hurt people who cannot defend themselves. Deathworlders, Krellick said quietly. He used the term that was already spreading through the station's communication networks. Everyone was talking about it. That is what my staff are calling your species. Morrison thought about this for a moment. If that means we come from a world that tried to kill us every single day until we got tough enough to survive, then yes. That name is fair and accurate. The door to the conference room opened. Krelix's aide entered with an urgent expression on his face. Ambassador, we are receiving priority communications from multiple governments. The Turian High Command, the Zerillian Empire, and the Vesk Council. They all want to know the same information. Let me guess, Sullivan said in a dry tone. They want to know how many ships Earth has. The aide's face showed that Sullivan was exactly right. Morrison and Sullivan looked at each other, and Krelix saw something pass between them. Some shared understanding that came from working together for a long time in dangerous situations. Morrison stood up from his chair. Tell them that the Defiant is not a warship. It is a survey vessel. We are scientists and explorers who happen to be very good at not dying. He turned to face Krelix directly. Ambassador, Earth has been building ships for only 6 months. We have been building weapons for 10,000 years. If the galaxy needs protectors, we will answer that call. But we would prefer to be explorers and scientists. We would prefer peace. After the humans left the conference room, Krelix sat alone for a long time. He stared at the datapad containing all the technical specifications of the Defiant that the humans had willingly shared. The ship was classified as a survey vessel. A survey ship had just destroyed a Kryn swarm force that would have required an entire military fleet to defeat using normal tactics. He began writing his official report to the Turian High Command. His fingers moved slowly across the interface as he chose each word carefully. This report would be read by the most powerful leaders in the Confederation. It would shape how his people viewed humanity going forward. The humans are not simply another species to be catalogued and welcomed into the galactic community, he wrote. They represent something we have not seen in millennia. They are warriors born from a world so hostile that warfare became part of their nature, yet they retain compassion, honor, and a desire for peace. This combination is both dangerous and absolutely necessary. He paused and looked at the scorch marks on the wall. Then he continued writing. I have reviewed the combat footage dozens of times. The human vessel moved in ways that should not be possible. It took risks that were borderline suicidal. It used weapons we consider primitive, and it won decisively. But what concerns me most is not their capability for violence. What concerns me is how comfortable they seemed during the battle. Captain Morrison sounded excited. This is a species that has not forgotten how to fight. More importantly, this is a species that is good at fighting and knows it. Krelix saved that section and started a new paragraph. However, I must also note their restraint. The humans could have demanded payment for their assistance. They could have used their victory to gain political leverage. They could have threatened us or made demands. They did none of these things. Captain Morrison spoke of preferring peace and exploration. I believe he was sincere. The humans remember how to be warriors, but they have not forgotten how to be civilized. He sat back and read what he had written. Then he added a final section. My recommendation to the High Command is clear. We should cultivate a strong alliance with Earth immediately. We should learn from them while we still can. If humanity decides to help us, we will have powerful allies. If they decide we are enemies, we will face a threat unlike anything in recorded history. The choice of which relationship we build is ours to make right now. We must choose wisely. Krelix sent the report and then opened his personal files. He created a new document titled Human Assessment and began adding his observations. They look fragile but are incredibly durable. They seem friendly but are natural predators. They speak of peace but excel at war. They are walking contradictions, and that makes them unpredictable. Over the next few days, more information came in. Other governments were conducting their own investigations into Earth. The reports painted an interesting picture. Humans had only achieved faster-than-light travel 8 months ago. They had only made official first contact with the galactic community 6 months ago, yet in that short time, they had already explored 20 star systems and established friendly relations with a dozen species. The Defiant was one of 12 survey ships Earth had launched. They were exploring, mapping, studying, and learning everything they could about the galaxy. They approached every new encounter with curiosity and openness. They shared their technology freely. They offered assistance to anyone who needed it, but every single one of their survey ships was armed like a military destroyer. Every human crew was trained in combat. Every vessel could go from scientific research to full combat readiness in seconds. They were explorers who were always ready for war. 3 weeks had passed since the battle at Valara Station. The Kryn swarm had disappeared into the dark spaces between star systems, licking their wounds and planning. Most species thought the threat was over. They were wrong. The Kryn made a second mistake about humans. The first mistake was attacking a station the humans were protecting. The second mistake was making it personal. Commander Alex Grant stood in the briefing room of the UES Valkyrie, Earth's first real military warship. She stared at the holographic display in front of her, and her hands clenched into fists. The images showed the aftermath of a Kryn attack on a human colony ship. The ship had been traveling to establish a new settlement called New Seattle in the Tau Ceti system. 347 people had been aboard that ship. Farmers who wanted to grow crops on a new world. Engineers who dreamed of building something from nothing. Teachers who wanted to educate the next generation. Families looking for a fresh start among the stars. The Kryn had pulled them out of hyperspace, boarded the defenseless vessel, and spent 6 hours killing everyone aboard. Then they left the ship drifting in space as a message. Grant was a career military officer. She had seen combat before during the last war on Earth. She knew how to control her emotions and focus on the mission. But this was different. She had known some of the colonists personally, a couple who had served with her years ago. Their 2 children who had been so excited about seeing new worlds. The Galactic Council is calling it a tragedy, Grant said. Her voice was flat and cold like ice. They are recommending sanctions and diplomatic protests against the Kryn. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Foster stood with his arms crossed. He was her tactical officer and had been with her for 5 years. Sanctions. Against a hive mind species that does not trade with anyone and views all other life as food to be consumed. That will surely stop them. Dr. Lisa Chen, the ship's xenobiologist, shook her head. The Council species have not fought a real war in thousands of years. They have forgotten what it means. They think stern words and economic pressure can solve everything. Grant closed the holographic display with a wave of her hand. Then we will remind them what war means. But we will do it the right way. Foster, I need a tactical assessment. Chen, I need everything you know about Kryn biology. We are going hunting. The plan took 30 minutes to develop. Intelligence suggested the Kryn operated from hidden nest worlds, massive organic structures that moved through deep space. They were mobile populations that struck at weak targets and then disappeared. The one pattern Earth's intelligence had identified was clear. The Kryn did not attack what they thought was too dangerous. They were intelligent enough to feel fear. Good, Grant said when Foster finished his presentation. Then we will give them something to be afraid of. Commander, Chen said carefully, the Galactic Council has already warned us against retaliation. They say it will only make things worse. They want us to let them handle this through proper channels. Grant turned to face her science officer. Dr. Chen, I respect the Council's desire for peace. I truly do. But there is a difference between peace and surrender. The Kryn need to learn that humanity is not prey. We are the thing that prey runs from. We are the apex predator. The Valkyrie left port along with 5 other Earth vessels. They did not try to hide their approach. They did not use stealth technology or try to be sneaky. They wanted the Kryn to see them coming. They wanted the Kryn to know what was about to happen. The fleet arrived at the coordinates where intelligence said a Kryn nest world operated. What they found was worse than expected. 3 nest worlds hung in space, each one the size of a small moon, plus a fleet of 50 bioships waited there. It was a trap. The Kryn had been waiting for the humans to come seeking revenge. Multiple contacts, Foster reported from his station. They are moving to surround us. Commander, this is a prepared ambush. I know, Grant said calmly. She had expected this. The Kryn were intelligent hunters. Of course they would set a trap. Let them surround us. Open a communication channel on all frequencies, including whatever frequencies the Kryn use for their hive communications. When the channel was open, Grant spoke clearly and slowly. She wanted to make sure every Kryn creature heard and understood her words. Attention, Kryn swarm. You killed 347 human beings. Men, women, and children. You did this because you thought we were weak. You thought we would be easy prey. You were wrong. This is your only chance to retreat. Leave now, or we will show you what humans do to those who murder our children. The Kryn response came quickly. The entire fleet of 50 bioships accelerated toward the Earth vessels. Bioweapons charged with deadly energy, boarding tendrils extended like the arms of deep-sea monsters. They were not going to retreat. They were going to attack. Grant felt something cold settle in her chest. Good. Now she did not have to hold back. All ships, weapons free. Show them what a death world produces. The battle that followed lasted only 14 minutes, but those 14 minutes were pure chaos. The Earth ships moved in ways that the Kryn had never seen before. Each vessel operated independently but perfectly coordinated with the others. They used tactics that made no sense to a hive mind species. They used tricks and deceptions. They sacrificed good positions to get better firing angles. They gambled with their lives because humans understood something the Kryn did not. Individual thinking. Individual courage. Individual rage. The Valkyrie dove straight into the center of the Kryn formation. Point defense systems shredded the boarding tendrils before they could grab hold. Railguns fired in perfect sequence, each shot calculated to hit vital organs inside the bioships. When one Kryn vessel tried to ram them, Foster activated the experimental plasma lance. The enemy ship simply ceased to exist in a bright flash. But it was what happened next that truly terrified the Kryn. After the fleet was scattered and broken, after half the bioships were dead or dying, the Earth ships did not chase the survivors. Instead, they turned toward the nest worlds themselves, the massive moon-sized structures that held millions of Kryn, the breeding grounds, the genetic repositories, the civilian population. Commander, Chen said quietly from her station, those nest worlds contain millions of non-combatants. Larvae, eggs, civilians if the Kryn can be said to have them. Grant stared at the tactical display. Every fiber of her being screamed at her to burn those nest worlds to ash. To repay blood with blood until the Kryn species was nothing but a bad memory. She wanted revenge for the colonists. She wanted revenge for the children. Her finger hovered over the firing control. But that was not what humanity stood for. That was not why Earth had unified and reached for the stars. That was not who they were trying to be. Open a channel to the nest worlds, Grant said finally. Her voice was hard but controlled. All frequencies. When the channel opened, she spoke. Kryn nest worlds, listen carefully. We could destroy you right now. Our weapons are locked on your positions. One command from me and you all die. But we are not going to do that. We choose mercy. We choose to be better than you. But understand this clearly. If you ever attack a human ship again, if you ever touch a human colony, if you ever harm a single human being, we will hunt down every nest world in this galaxy and turn them into debris fields. We will not stop. We will not negotiate. We will not show mercy again. We are not prey. We are not victims. We are the species that conquered a death world. We are humanity, and we protect our own. The Kryn did not respond with words. They had no spoken language. But the bio readings from the nest world showed something the sensors had never detected before. Fear. Deep, instinctive chemical fear that flooded through the hive mind like poison. The Earth fleet turned and departed, leaving the nest worlds intact but the lesson delivered. As they jumped to hyperspace, Foster looked at Grant with a question in his eyes. You could have destroyed them, Commander. Why did you not? Grant was quiet for a long moment. Because that is what they would have done. That is what monsters do. We are not monsters, Foster. We are humans. We fight when we must. We kill when we have no choice. But we do not commit genocide just because we have the power to do so. That is the line we do not cross. That is what separates us from creatures like the Kryn. The news of the battle spread across the galaxy with surprising speed. The humans had won a decisive military victory against a superior force. But more importantly, they had shown mercy when they could have chosen destruction. They had proven themselves to be warriors with honor. Dangerous but controlled. Deadly but civilized. On Valara Station, Ambassador Krellix updated his files on humanity once again. Dangerous, he typed into his report. But perhaps exactly what the galaxy needs. They remember how to fight, but they have not forgotten how to be civilized. They could have become the very monsters they fought against. Instead, they chose a harder path. They chose restraint. The Council should pray that humans remain our allies. We should fear them as enemies. And we should never, ever mistake their kindness for weakness. Today they showed both fangs and wisdom. The Deathworlders of Earth are not mindless killers. They are thinking, feeling beings who happen to be very good at war. 6 months after the Kryn learned their lesson, Ambassador Krelix found himself in a very unusual situation. He was sitting in Geneva on Earth, in a conference room that overlooked mountains so tall they seemed to touch the sky. The air was thin and cold. Even with his environmental suit helping him breathe, he felt uncomfortable and slightly dizzy. The humans sitting around the table wore light clothing and seemed perfectly fine. They did not even seem to notice the altitude that was making Krelix struggle. "Thank you for coming, Ambassador," said Secretary General Maria Santos. She was Earth's representative to the Galactic Council. She was an older woman with gray hair and sharp eyes that had seen many difficult things. "We know the journey from Turian space is not easy. When Earth requests a private meeting, one accepts the invitation," Krelix said politely. Around the table sat representatives from 6 other species. All of them were major powers in the galactic community. All of them looked as uncomfortable as Krelix felt, though not from the thin air. Colonel Peter Hayes, Earth's military liaison officer, activated a holographic display above the center of the table. "We have been tracking Kryn movements since the New Seattle incident. They have gone quiet and pulled back into the dark spaces between systems, but they have not disappeared. They are still out there. Earth's concern is appreciated," said Ambassador Zill of the Zerillian Empire. Her voice sounded like tinkling glass, beautiful but cold. "But the swarm has been a manageable threat for centuries. They attack, we respond, they retreat. This is simply how things work." "Manageable," Hayes repeated the word. Something in his tone made everyone sit up straighter and pay attention. "With respect, Ambassador Zill, you have been managing them by letting them eat colonies that cannot defend themselves. Then you file diplomatic protests afterward. That is not management. That is acceptance. That is letting innocent people die because you do not want to fight." The room went very quiet. It was the kind of statement that could destroy diplomatic relations. But Hayes did not look away from the stares directed at him. He stood his ground. Santos smoothly stepped in before anyone could respond angrily. "What Colonel Hayes means is that Earth proposes an alternative solution. We have been sharing our defensive technologies with the Council, our weapons, our tactics, our training methods. But technology alone is not enough. You need something else, and what is that?" Krelix asked. He suspected he already knew the answer. "You need to remember how to fight," Santos said simply. "Not just defend yourselves, not just react to attacks, but actually fight back. The galaxy has been at peace for so long that you have forgotten what war actually means. The Kryn have not forgotten. They are apex predators. They have learned that the civilized species are easy prey because you refuse to fight properly." The door opened and another human entered. Krelix recognized Captain Jack Morrison from Valera Station, but he was not a captain anymore. His uniform now showed the rank of admiral. He looked tired, like someone who had been working too hard for too long. "The Galactic Defense Initiative," Morrison said. He distributed information tablets to each representative around the table. "Earth proposes creating a joint military force. Ships and personnel from multiple species, trained and equipped to handle threats like the Kryn. We will provide the tactical training, the combat doctrine, and the hard truths about warfare that nobody wants to hear. You provide the personnel and the resources to build the fleet." "You want to militarize the galaxy," Zill said. Her voice carried accusation and anger. "No," Morrison replied firmly. "We want to protect it. There is a big difference. Right now, every species handles security independently. That means the Kryn can pick off isolated targets one at a time. A unified response force changes that calculation completely. They will think twice before attacking if they know a real military will respond immediately." Ambassador Then of the Vesk Council spoke up. He was from a philosophical species that valued peace above all else. "Admiral Morrison, your people are warriors by nature. It is in your blood, a result of your violent evolution. We chose a different path long ago. Must we abandon our principles just to survive?" Morrison was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "Ambassador Then, I have read about your people's philosophy, the way of the peaceful mind. It is beautiful, and I mean that sincerely. But here is what I have learned in my years of military service. Peace is not the absence of violence. Peace is the presence of justice. And sometimes justice requires the threat of force to maintain. You do not have to become warriors yourselves, but you need warriors to protect you so you can continue to be peaceful. That is what we are offering." Krelix watched the other ambassadors think about this. It was a convincing argument, especially coming from a species that had proven their combat abilities so dramatically. But it was also dangerous. Giving humans more influence over galactic military affairs could shift the balance of power in ways nobody could predict. And if we agree to this initiative, Krelix said slowly and carefully, what guarantees do we have that Earth will not use this force for its own purposes? Forgive my bluntness, Admiral, but your species is very young in galactic terms. You have been part of our community for less than a year. How do we know you will not become the next threat we need to defend against? Santos met his eyes directly. Her gaze was steady and honest. You do not know, Ambassador. You have to trust us, and I know that is asking a lot. But consider this fact. In the 6 months since first contact, Earth has shared every defensive technology we have developed. We have offered training, support, and protection with no demands for payment. We have had the power to conquer weaker species, and we have chosen to cooperate instead. That is not a guarantee of our future behavior, but it is a track record you can examine. The debate continued for many hours. Arguments went back and forth. Some ambassadors worried about human dominance. Others worried about the cost. Some feared that creating a military force would make conflicts more likely instead of less likely, but slowly opinions began to shift. By the end of the long day, 5 of the 7 species agreed to participate in the Galactic Defense Initiative. The Xerillian Empire and the Vesk Council chose to abstain. They would not join, but they would not oppose it either. They wanted to watch and see what happened before making a commitment. As the meeting concluded and ambassadors began to leave, Krelix approached Morrison privately. Admiral, may I ask you something personal? Of course, Ambassador. Your people are natural warriors. You are very good at violence and combat. Does it not concern you that you might be too good at this? That you might come to enjoy fighting more than peace? Morrison's expression became very serious. Every single day, Ambassador. Every day I worry about that. It keeps me awake at night sometimes. That is why we teach our soldiers about the wars we fought against each other. The wars where we killed millions of our own species. The cities we burned. The weapons we used. The horror we inflicted on ourselves. We remember what we are capable of so we do not become that again. The best warrior is the one who never wants to fight but knows how when there is no other choice. Krelix nodded slowly, processing this. Then perhaps there is hope for all of us, Admiral. Because the galaxy needs warriors who understand the true cost of war. We need people who know how to fight but prefer not to. As Krelix departed Earth and began the long journey home, he thought about everything he had learned. The humans were building something unprecedented, a military force that would serve the entire galactic community rather than any single government. It was ambitious and idealistic. It was probably a little bit insane by normal standards. It was also exactly what the galaxy needed to survive. Over the following months, the Galactic Defense Initiative took shape. Humans provided the training and tactical expertise. Other species contributed ships, personnel, and resources. Training facilities were established on multiple worlds. Young officers from a dozen species learned human combat doctrine and studied Earth's military history. It was not always easy. Some species struggled with the aggressive tactics humans favored. Others found it difficult to make quick decisions in combat situations. The physical demands were especially challenging. Human instructors had to constantly remember that other species could not survive the same G-forces and stresses that humans considered normal. But slowly, it started to work. Mixed crews learned to operate together. Different species discovered they could complement each other's strengths and weaknesses. The Turians had excellent strategic planning abilities. The Vesk who did join proved to be naturally talented at coordination and communication. The Xelians had incredible reflexes that made them excellent pilots, and the humans provided the core that held it all together. They taught aggression tempered with discipline. They taught courage backed by training. They taught the difference between fighting to win and fighting to survive. 6 months after the Geneva meeting, the first GDI fleet was operational. 15 ships crewed by personnel from 8 different species. They began patrol routes through the most vulnerable regions of known space. Their presence alone deterred several pirate groups and caused the Kryn to pull back even further. The Galactic Defense Initiative's first real test came 18 months after its founding. It came from a direction nobody expected. The Kryn were still hiding in the dark spaces, staying away from patrolled routes. The usual pirates and raiders had learned to avoid GDI ships. Peace seemed to be settling across known space like a comfortable blanket. Then the Void Collective arrived. They came from beyond the galactic rim, from the empty darkness where no known species lived. Their ships were enormous geometric structures that hurt to look at. They seemed to exist partially in normal space and partially somewhere else. Scientists could not explain how their vessels worked. Communication attempts failed completely at first. The translation computers could not make sense of their signals. Finally, one message came through clearly in every known language. It was simple and terrifying. Submit or be harvested. The first system to fall was Theta Carinae, a Turian colony world. 2 billion people lived there in cities that covered 3 continents. The void ships appeared in orbit without warning. They ignored all attempts at communication. They ignored all demands to leave. Instead, they deployed massive harvesting machines that began systematically processing every living thing on the planet into raw organic material. The Turian defense fleet responded with everything they had. 20 warships, the pride of the Confederation military. They attacked with energy weapons and missiles. They used every tactic in their database. It was not enough. Not even close. The void ships' strange hulls made conventional weapons almost useless. Energy beams passed through them like they were ghosts. Missiles exploded without causing damage. In 6 hours, the entire fleet was destroyed. The harvesting continued. The distress call reached GDI headquarters on Valera Station within minutes. Admiral Morrison, now the overall commander of the initiative, assembled his command staff in the operations center. The holographic display showed the Theta Carinae system and the 12 massive void ships in orbit around the dying world. "Give me an analysis," Morrison said. His voice was calm, but his eyes were hard. Commander Linda Rodriguez, the tactical director, highlighted important data on the display. "They are using some kind of dimensional shifting technology. When our weapons hit them, they are not fully present in our dimension. The weapons pass through without effect, but they have to phase back into normal space to use their harvesting equipment. There is a brief window when they become solid and vulnerable." "How brief?" asked Colonel Hayes, who was now Morrison's second in command. "0.3 seconds. Maybe less. Our sensors are having trouble getting accurate readings." Morrison rubbed his jaw, thinking hard. Around him, representatives from a dozen species watched with desperate hope written on their faces. The Void Collective was unlike anything the galaxy had encountered. "They made the Kryn look like a minor annoyance. What about mass?" Morrison asked suddenly. "They might be able to phase out of our dimension for energy weapons, but they still have to obey basic physics when they interact with our space. Can we hit them with kinetic weapons during their vulnerable phase?" Rodriguez ran quick calculations on her computer. "Theoretically, yes, but the timing would have to be absolutely perfect. We would need targeting computers, fast enough to predict the phase shifts and weapons that can fire instantly when they solidify. We have those," said Dr. Lisa Chen. She had joined the military side of GDI as Chief of Research and Development. Human reflexes combined with AI targeting systems. If we can get close enough, we can hurt them. Krelix, now serving as civilian liaison to GDI, spoke up from his observation station. "Admiral, Theta Carinae has 2 billion souls living on it. Even if we defeat the void ships, the harvesting has been ongoing for hours. How many have already died?" Morrison's face became like stone. "Then we move fast and save whoever we can. Rodriguez, I need a battle plan in 30 minutes. Hayes, scramble the rapid response fleet. Every ship we can get there immediately. Chen, get every scientist we have working on understanding those phase shifts. We need every advantage we can possibly get." The plan that emerged was crazy by any normal military standard. The GDI fleet would jump directly into the Theta Carinae system at maximum velocity. They would use their momentum to carry them through whatever defensive perimeter the Void had established. Human-piloted fighters would lead the assault, because their faster reflexes gave them a split-second advantage in targeting. If they could disable enough harvesters, maybe the Void would decide the planet was not worth the cost. It was a massive gamble. But it was the only chance 2 billion people had. The GDI fleet emerged from hyperspace like an avalanche crashing down a mountain. 23 ships from 6 different species, led by the Valkyrie and Morrison's new flagship, the UES Defiance Pride. The name honored the ship that had started everything at Valera Station. "All ships, weapons free," Morrison ordered over the fleet communication channel.
"Fighter wings, you are our edge."
"Make every single shot count." Captain Sophie Blake led the fighter wing. 60 small craft piloted by humans and the handful of other species who had proven they could handle extreme combat maneuvers. They dove toward the Void ships like hunting birds attacking much larger prey. The Void responded immediately. Their weapons were beams of twisted space-time that could tear a ship apart at the molecular level. 2 GDI cruisers simply vanished in the first exchange. There 1 second and gone the next. Blake's wingman ceased to exist when a void beam caught his fighter directly, but the humans kept coming. They always kept coming, no matter the cost. Blake lined up her targeting system on a void ship as it phased back into normal space to deploy a harvesting beam toward the planet below. 0.3 seconds. She had 0.3 seconds. She fired the instant her computer gave her the confirmation tone. The tungsten rod struck the void ship's hull while it was solid. The impact was not devastating, but it was enough to disrupt whatever machinery kept the ship phased out of normal space. It worked, Blake shouted over the tactical communication network. Hit them when they solidify. Target the points where the harvesting beams connect to their hulls. The battle became a deadly dance of precision timing. GDI ships coordinated their fire, human and alien crews working together like they had trained for months. They predicted phase shifts and exploited tiny windows of vulnerability. It was chaos. It was terrifying. People were dying with every passing second, but slowly, painfully, they began to turn the tide. One void ship shuddered and went dark, its phase systems failing completely. Then another. The harvesting on the planet slowed as the void ships were forced to focus on defending themselves instead of processing the population. Then Morrison saw it. The pattern in how the void ships moved and communicated. They were not randomly phasing in and out. They were coordinating their actions, which meant there had to be a command structure. He traced the communication patterns through the sensor data and found the largest ship hanging back from the main battle. That is their command vessel, he said with certainty. All ships concentrate all fire on the following coordinates. We take out their leadership, maybe the others will break and run. It was a human tactic. Cut off the head and the body dies. The Void might not think like humans, but every intelligent species had some form of leadership structure. The entire GDI fleet changed course and converged on the command ship. They accepted terrible losses to get into position. The Defiant's pride took a direct hit. Her shields failed completely. Hull breaches opened in 6 different sections. Morrison felt the deck shudder beneath his feet, but kept his focus on the tactical display. All forward batteries synchronize firing solutions. Fire on my mark. 3, 2, 1 mark. The combined firepower of the entire GDI fleet, every weapon firing in perfect coordination, struck the Void command ship during a phase transition. For just 1 instant, the massive vessel was solid and vulnerable. In that instant, it was hit with enough kinetic energy to shatter a small moon. The command ship exploded in a flash of light and strange energies. Something remarkable happened next. The other Void ships stopped moving. For 10 seconds, they hung motionless in space as if confused or lost. Then, as one unified group, they began to retreat. They phased out of normal space and disappeared back toward the galactic rim where they had come from. The battle was over. Theta Carinae was saved, though the scars of partial harvesting would take generations to heal. Of the 23 ships that had entered the system, only 17 survived to see the victory. Thousands of GDI personnel were dead or wounded. In the aftermath, as rescue operations began on the planet and wounded were evacuated to medical ships, Morrison stood in what remained of his flagship's bridge. Damage control teams worked around him, sealing hull breaches and restoring systems. He looked at the casualty reports coming in. 347 GDI personnel confirmed dead, the same number as the colonists on the New Seattle. The universe had a cruel sense of symmetry. Krelix found him there an hour later. The ambassador looked exhausted and shaken. His environmental suit was damaged from when the bridge had lost atmosphere briefly. Admiral, the Galactic Council wants to know how you knew the plan would work. Morrison looked at him with tired eyes. I did not know, Ambassador.